Hey, what's up everybody and welcome back to the channel. So the Xbox Series has now been on the market for 2 whole years, which is almost hard to believe. I mean, time really does fly, but I thought it was a good time to take a look at some of the best games that's released so far this generation for the Xbox Series X and also the Xbox Series S. Now, not last generation games that run through backwards compatibility, but rather native Xbox Series games. That's the games that we are going to look at today. And it's actually a pretty strong library as well. I've been very impressed by Xbox so far this generation. And that's kind of the crazy thing here, because their first-party studios are only just now getting started. I mean, 2023, it's still looking pretty insane, but this list does include 20 different games. There's some first-party games here, there's some big AAA blockbusters, and also a few indies as well. I think there's a lot of variety here, and just a little bit of something for everybody. So if you are new to the Xbox ecosystem, or maybe you're just looking for a new Xbox game, well, here's the list for you, because we do have some good ones here, I have to say. Without a further ado though, you know it, let's just go and jump right into it. So to start off this list, I have Immortals Fenyx Rising, which I like to describe as the most overlooked open world game on the market right now. It's actually criminal on how underappreciated this game actually is, and I think a lot of that comes down to its art style. It doesn't necessarily seem to immediately grab everybody's attention, but it's actually very pretty on screen when you see it in motion, and most importantly, it's very fun. It does play a lot like Zelda Breath of the Wild, and you can clearly see that with its climb mechanics, its dungeons, and really even with its gliding, but it still plays like its own thing as well. It's not just some simple clone and nothing more, and hey, Xbox doesn't have Zelda, so I mean, if anything, this is a good alternative in that sense. Definitely though, don't overlook Immortals Fenyx Rising. Now here I have The Forgotten City, which, I mean, this is a game that actually took me by complete surprise. I kept hearing about how good this game was, so I just kind of went in blind one day. But once I turned this game on, I never went back. This game's narrative and setting is so unique in how it's laid out. On the surface, The Forgotten City is a mystery adventure game of exploration and deduction, but essentially you find yourself transported to a cursed Roman city where if one person sins, the whole city will die. Now, what actually qualifies as a sin, that's a little bit of a mystery. However, though, you for some reason are stuck in a time loop, which allows you to uncover the mystery and why the city is cursed and find a way to save the few civilians that are left. It's not necessarily an action-packed game, but if you're looking for a gripping and unique narrative, I would highly recommend The Forgotten City. Alright, so next up here I have Gears Tactics, which is a perfect combination of Gears of War in a turn-based tactical format. It is a different way to play Gears, but the gameplay translates in a really satisfying way. It is a little bit more tactical in the sense that you're controlling various units in an almost chess-like match, but however, they also manage to keep the aggressive nature from the Gears series by encouraging players to execute their enemies. By doing this, you'll gain an additional move which adds both to the game's speed as well as to its strategy, as this can also put your units in more of a disadvantageous position. If anything though, I'd say the Gears Tactics is worthy of the series name, and whether you like the franchise or really if you just like this genre, games like XCOM and things like that, well, Gears Tactics, it's a good game either way. In a world where we haven't seen Splinter Cell or Metal Gear Solid in years, oh, come on, let's bring those games back. But either way, Hitman has kind of taken up that mantle as arguably the best stealth-based series on the market right now. And Hitman 3 is pure genius in its gameplay and in its level design. In Hitman 3, you're basically put in a playground where you're given a task to simply assassinate a target. And that's where the fun begins, because it gives you, the player, the freedom of choice to deal with each target as you see fit. There's not necessarily one set way to deal with the situation, which makes you feel like a legitimate hitman. It's just a pure sandbox of assassination. Now, if you're looking for a game to take advantage of the power of the Xbox series, then Flight Simulator is a stunning, and I mean a stunning game to watch in motion. I mean, just look at this game. It's almost photorealistic at times. Now, it is one of those games, though, that might not necessarily be for everybody per se, but for those that do like these type of games, it's pure aviation perfection. You can fly across the worlds and just witness these gorgeous landmarks, and technically, you can even fly over your very own house. It's kind of surreal in a way, especially for those that's just dreamt of flying their whole life. And on top of that, there's a lot of aircrafts to mix things up in terms of gameplay. Again, Flight Simulator might not necessarily be for everybody per se, but if anything, I'd say it's an experience everybody should have at least once. Now, Xbox fans for a long time have been asking for more JRPGs, and one trend that we are seeing this generation is that Xbox, they're finally responding, and you can very much see that here with Tales of Arise. This is from the long-running action JRPG Tales of series, but this time Bandai Namco gave Tales of Arise more time in the oven, and it paid off in a major way. I'd say that Tales of Arise has quietly become one of the better AAA JRPGs available. It's got an interesting story about a slave that feels no pain, and this mixes well with the dynamics of the other characters. It's got a beautiful timeless art style, and then in terms of combat, you have to work with your team to pull off these smartly timed combos, and it's just a lot of fun. Tales of Arise from top to bottom is just a really good game, and if you are one of those fans that's been wanting more JRPGs, this is definitely one worth checking out. Now, there's a lot of survival games out there where you build bases, gather resources, try to get food and water, things like that, and you pretty much know what to expect from these type of games. I've greatly enjoyed some of these games in my past, and they can be very addictive with their gameplay loops, where they just kind of embrace creativity from players. And well, Grounded does all of that. But it's also a really special game in the sense that it's not just a survival game, but this is also a legitimate RPG coming from the Fallout New Vegas and Outer Worlds creators, Obsidian Entertainment. That's right, this is coming from some of the best RPG developers, period. And they brought that expertise to a survival game and pulled it off phenomenally well. On top of that, one of the things I really like about this game is that there's also an end goal, as there's a story here, a quite interesting one at that. So unlike other survival games out there, there's an actual sense of finality. So Grounded in the grand scheme of things is not just yet another survival game, but rather I'd say it's an evolution on the genre. Now here's a unique game that really stands out, being A Plague Tale Requiem. This is a game that fits more into that modern cinematic adventure mold, but it really sticks out thanks to its atmosphere, stealth-based gameplay, and emotionally driven story. You do play as a young girl trying to protect her sickly little brother as the two scour the rat-infested world. Now, as to the reason why they set off on their own, I'll kind of leave that as a mystery, but do know that the story is absolutely gripping from beginning to end. Now, as for gameplay, it does center around solving different puzzles and stealth-based mechanics, but you do have a lot of tools at your disposal this time around. From a slingshot, you have a crossbow, among several alchemy-based additives. So you do have the option of being completely stealth-based, or if you just want to kill every enemy that you see, technically, you can do that. The way you play, though, does impact your character and how she grows statistically, which is a really interesting mechanic. I actually found myself working twice as hard not to kill people because of how your character is impacted by your gameplay decisions. It's a neat idea that I think works really well. It is important to note here, though, that this is a sequel to a very story-driven game, so I do kind of recommend checking out the first game as well, being A Plague Tale Innocence. Both are, however, excellent games. Now, there's certain games that are just so good that they've essentially created their own genres. You have your Souls-likes and you have your Zelda-likes, but what if I told you there's actually a game out there, a really good one by the way, that captures both of those experiences in one fell swoop? Well, that's exactly what Tunic is. Yeah, now don't let the art style fool you here. It might look cutesy and everything on the surface, but this is a difficult game inspired by the Soulsborne series. There's some awe-inspiring bosses that are just going to destroy you in this game. It does have those quote-unquote bonfires, and it's also got that methodical combat to it. Now, its Zelda-like nature, though, that's a little bit more apparent here, but there's also this engaging mystery that just kind of pushes you ever forward. That's actually one of the coolest things about this game, though. It's mystery and the way that you solve it. You actually find these hidden pages throughout its world that gives you clues in where you go, and they show you hidden mechanics that you might not have necessarily known about otherwise. Kind of like an old strategy guide. Tunic, though, I mean, what I'm going to just kind of say about this game is that it's quietly not only one of the best games that's released in 2022, but it's also just one of the best games available on the Xbox Series right now. Now, if you like good story-driven single-player experiences, I firmly believe that there's not many games out there that can stand toe-to-toe with the Yakuza and Judgment series. The moment-to-moment action in these games are just so thrilling, with twists and turns around every single corner, and they tie that in nicely with its Japanese culture that just bleeds atmosphere, and then it also has that over-the-top gameplay. From top to bottom, these are excellent games with lots of things to do, as you can also freely explore their dense cities. Now, there are two different styles of games here, though. So in terms of native Xbox Series games, you have Yakuza Like a Dragon, which is actually the 7th installment to the series, and this is a turn-based JRPG, whereas Judgment, which is a spin-off, it's got beat-em-up style gameplay similar to the first 6 games. Now, if you are new to the series, I would recommend Judgment, as it does have a completely different story and characters, but you can still technically jump into Yakuza Like a Dragon as well, with no previous knowledge of the series. Either which way, these are both top-tier single-player experiences. One of Xbox's new premier first-party studios, Arcane, under Bethesda Studios, is already showing their talent with Deathloop. Now, this was a timed PlayStation exclusive there for a while, but it is now finally available on Xbox, and this is a creative first-person shooter where you play as an assassin stuck in a death loop, hence the name of the game. In order to break the loop, though, you'll need to assassinate 8 different targets in quick succession, but if you fail, the loop then resets. That there, though, is really where the fun begins, as it gives you, the player, the creative freedom to discover the best method and the best route to take. And because of its brilliant level design and entertaining story, it's always a pure joy to play. Now, I don't typically like roguelites all that much, where if you die, you start back from the beginning. But Hades, yeah, it's kind of its own special breed of a game. This game, to put it short, is truly a masterpiece in every sense of the word. Essentially, you play as Zagreus, the son of Hades, and he sets out to escape the underworld and his father's rule. In order to do that, Zagreus will go room to room and fight off the many enemies in his way, but if you die, you'll then have to start back at the beginning. And while that might sound like a grueling and repetitive task, it never really feels that way in Hades. I mean, it's so strange, but in this game, it actually almost makes you feel rewarded when you die. And I know that sounds weird and everything, but it really does, because the story itself is just so interesting. The characters in the universe, they're so captivating. So when you die in this game, it just allows you to learn a little bit more about its world, its story, and also its characters. On top of that, each attempt to escape the underworld, it always feels different, because with each room that you clear, you then have a choice of taking one of multiple paths. Each path will then reward you with an ability or an upgrade. So there's a lot of strategy that can completely change how this game is played in terms of combat. There's also various weapons that you can choose from that, again, all feel vastly different. And seriously, I mean, you can easily sink 50 plus or even 100 plus hours into Hades, and it will still be insanely fun. That is a true testament to how good this game actually is. So from a story perspective, to its characters, to its just overall gameplay, Hades is without a shadow of doubt a masterpiece that you need to play. In recent years, Resident Evil has come back in a pretty major way, and that's not only in the form of remakes, but also with their completely new games like Resident Evil Village Gold, which now has 2 campaigns including its Winters expansion. In the main campaign, you play as Ethan Winters trying to find his daughter and must fight off the likes of werewolves, vampires, among other terrifying creatures to do so. I'd say that it mixes in a good amount of horror alongside its action, really kind of giving you the best of both worlds. But thanks to its smart level design and the way that the world interconnects, it's a slow terror that builds up as you explore each new locale. The thing about Resident Evil Village, though, is that it was already good with memorable villains and everything that you'd expect from the franchise, but the Gold Edition did add value by including a new third-person camera option in case you prefer that over first-person. Then you also get the Winters expansion that has you play as an entirely different character in a new campaign that also plays quite a bit different. Now, I won't explain why for spoiler-related reasons, but Resident Evil Village Gold is a must-own for fans of the series, or really for just fans of the horror genre. Alright, so next up here I have It Takes Two, which might actually be the most creative game that I've ever played in my entire life. Now, that's no exaggeration either. It is absolutely brilliant in how every single level in this game continuously changes up in terms of gameplay and in its design. So this is actually a mandatory cooperative game, but don't let that stop you here. It does come with a free friend pass, so you can actually have anybody join you online without them actually needing to purchase the game themselves. And you are absolutely going to want to experience this one together. First off, the story is very well done and highly amusing. You play as this troubled married couple turned to dolls, and the only way that they'll get the chance to go back to normal is by working together. Now you're kind of seeing where the amusement comes from. But this is also done in a number of different ways. In one level, you might have to fly a piece-together airplane trying to escape killer squirrels out of all things, where in another level, it might play like a third-person shooter instead. While it might look like it, this is not just a 3D platformer. There's just so much more going on here, and I'm just going to go out on a limb here and say this might actually be the best cooperative game of all time. Yes, it is that good. After years and years of Atlus and Sega just being big doofuses, they have finally brought Persona over to Xbox consoles. I mean, sure, it took them long enough and everything, but hey, it's better late than never. However, this does include Persona 5 Royal, which you can actually pick up right now, and then soon, also Persona 3 and Persona 4 Golden. Now, technically, those two aren't out as of the making of this video, but I have actually played all three of these games, and they are very much as good as advertised. These are, without a doubt, among the very best turn-based JRPGs to ever exist. Now, I will say, even though Persona 5 Royal is the most popular, which, I mean, that's fine and everything because it's a great game, Persona 4 Golden, however, is actually my own personal favorite in the series, so definitely don't sleep on that one when it does eventually release. The way these games work, though, is that you play as your everyday high school student, and it's more or less a social sim where you manage your time. But then there's these parallel worlds that you get sucked into where they become more of a turn-based dungeon crawler. This is where you fight off demons and uncover the mysterious happenings that intersects with the human world. Their stories, though, their characters, their atmosphere, and combat are all just masterfully done in the Persona series. Again, the wait was well worth it. Definitely go play Persona 5 right now, and when Persona 4 and 3 comes out, yeah, you're going to want to go check those ones out as well. Alright, so now here we are in the final stretch, the top 5, and that starts with Forza Horizon 5, and it's probably one of the greatest racing games ever made. It's a stunning spectacle of a game set in an open-world Mexico where it ingrains car culture into its landscape. Now, being set in Mexico this time, there's a wide range of locales to explore, from lush jungles to vast deserts or even an active volcano. The thing about Forza Horizon, though, is that they're never afraid to be creative and mix in a lot of different ways to race. This could be in the form of off-road, insane, just over-the-top set pieces, or even with its Hot Wheels expansion. Now, if you want to talk about a perfect combination here, Forza Horizon plus Hot Wheels both looks and feels amazing. Alright, so technically, Ori and the Will of the Wisp did release right before the Xbox Series came out, but it did get an Xbox Series enhancement that was very much needed. Now this already beautiful, quite frankly, stunning game can run up to 4K resolution and 120 frames per second. And let me tell you, if you like Metroidvania games, it really is among the best of the best ever made. I mean, I'm talking right up there with games like Castlevania, Metroid, and Hollow Knight. Now, Ori and the Will of the Wisp, though, is a little bit different than a lot of other games in the genre because it does emphasize its platforming a lot more. But its platforming is so good that it actually plays better than a lot of 2D platformers on the market, which is something that you don't really see all that often when it comes to Metroidvanias. You'll really see that, though, in its boss sequences where it'll really, truly put your platforming skills to the test. It's not just that, though, because Ori and the Will of the Wisps, it also has really good combat, so it's not just a one-dimensional game. This is a complete Metroidvania, and to top it off, it's also got an emotionally enticing story. I think this is one of those games, though, that you're going to hear about for decades, because it's always going to feel and look good regardless of how many years pass. And next up here, I have Xbox's flagship title, Halo Infinite. And this is such an interesting one in the aspect its multiplayer could still improve with more content. But with that said, Halo Infinite is still an absolutely excellent game, especially when it comes to its single-player campaign. For the first time ever, Halo is an open-world game, and while I was originally skeptical if they could actually mesh its core first-person shooter gameplay into more of an immersive open world, well, 343, they pulled it off with flying colors. Not only is its world fun to explore with its new grappling hook that basically makes you feel like you're Spider-Man, but it also has one of the better stories within the Halo franchise. There were some true emotional beats this time around, and the entire cast is very well written. I actually would put this as one of the better Halo campaigns all around, and because of its open world layout, there's plenty to do besides just its story. As for its multiplayer, though, like I said, it does need more content still, but with that said, from a mechanical standpoint, it's absolutely fantastic. Now, for these next two games, though, they both really just blew me away, and they very well might sit among my favorite games of all time. The first of which being Psychonauts 2. This is actually one of the select few games ever that I supported through crowdfunding, because I always viewed the first game as one of the all-time great Collectathon 3D platformers that sadly was just really overlooked for its time. So I was thrilled when Psychonauts had a chance to come back with a sequel. Well, I'm actually even more thrilled to say that not only did it meet my expectations, but Double Fine, they exceeded them by far. Psychonauts 2 takes everything from that original game, the quirky characters, the tight platforming, the creativity that comes from entering one's mind, and it just runs with all of those things and improves upon them. Now, earlier I said It Takes Two is the most creative game that I've ever played, but Psychonauts 2 is right there as well, and when you combine that creativity with excellent storytelling, lovable characters with a good sense of humor, and also a well-realized world, you get an instant classic like you do here with Psychonauts 2. I mean, you don't usually think about storytelling when you talk about Collectathon 3D platformers, but Psychonauts 2 really is a special breed there. It does touch up on some mental issues, so it is a surprisingly deep story, but it also knows how to be humorous and lighthearted as well. So from its 3D Collectathon gameplay to its just insane amount of creativity from level to level to its story, Psychonauts 2 really is a special game. And at the number one spot, the other game that truly blew me away is none other than Elden Ring. I mean, this game is so masterful in every single thing that it does. I absolutely got hooked on this game. I put like 150 hours into this game in like a 2-week period. I never do that type of thing. But Elden Ring is a brutally challenging action RPG. Kind of reminds me of an older 90s game, but thrown into more of this modern package with more advanced gameplay. It's like an alternate history in a sense that what if games would have continued in that direction where they don't hold your hands, where they reward you for investigating its world with secrets. I mean, you're going to find optional bosses in this game and hidden but powerful weapons, and you can uncover more layers to its story by piecing its world and items together. And to top everything off, you just have that addictive and challenging gameplay. Of course, this is a From Software game and everything, so I mean, you do expect that challenging gameplay. But even then, I'd still put Elden Ring right at the top of From Software's best work ever, and that's already an achievement because pretty much all the Soulsborne games are great. I think one of the best parts about this game, though, is not just with its world that George R.R. Martin helped create, but also how much player choice is involved with its gameplay. There's a lot of different builds thanks to its many weapons and abilities that allows you to choose what type of combat best fits you. And that's going to be important considering some of its very, and I mean very challenging bosses, to say the least. Now, in terms of story, though, I do want to highlight that as well, because if you truly do pay attention and put its world together, it actually does have a really good story. Elden Ring, though, this game's not just a simple masterpiece, but I'm going to go and say it's one of the best games that I've ever played, just period. At the very least, it's one of my own personal favorite games ever made, and that is why it is number one on this list. Definitely check out Elden Ring. Anyways, though, that's it for this list, but hopefully you found some good games to play, and if I did forget to mention any of your favorite games, let me know in the comments below. That way we can all discover those as well. With that said, though, if you did find yourself enjoying the video, do make sure to hit those buttons below, like, subscribe, and hit that bell button. And also, if you'd like to support the channel through Patreon, thank you for making this content possible. Peace out.